Look at it. A fist-sized lump of bronze, green with 2,000 years of corrosion. Greek sponge divers pulled it out of a shipwreck in 1901. For about a year, nobody looked twice. Then a museum worker noticed a gear wheel set into the crust, and tiny Greek letters inside this corroded metal sit dozens of meshing bronze gears. It is the oldest known computer on Earth, hand-cranked, geared Greek. The story starts in the spring of 1900 with men who were not looking for history. They were sponge divers from the Greek island of Symi, led by a captain named Dimitrios Kontos. On their way to the sponge grounds off North Africa, rough weather forced them to shelter beside a tiny island called Antikythera. While they waited, they dived. A diver named Elias Stadiatis went down about 45 meters and came back up shaken. As the story goes, he babbled about a heap of dead bodies and horses lying on the seabed. Kontos dived himself to check and brought up a corroded bronze arm. It was not a graveyard. It was a field of statues. They had found a Roman-era shipwreck loaded with Greek treasure. Over the next 2 years, the divers worked with the Hellenic Navy to bring it up. The work was brutal. By the accounts that survive, 1 diver died of what we now call the bends, and 2 more were left paralyzed. Everything they raised went to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. The museum had reasons to be excited. The wreck gave up beautiful things. A life-sized bronze youth, a weathered bronze head later nicknamed the philosopher, marble gods and horses, glassware, jewelry, coins. This was a cargo of luxury, probably bound for wealthy buyers in Italy, on a ship that sank around 70 to 60 BC. And here is the strange part. The machine inside was already old when the ship went down. Most experts date its making to the century before, somewhere around 150 to 100 BC. By the time it sank, it may already have been a prized antique, decades old, perhaps closer to 100 years. Next to all of that, one object looked like nothing. A shoe-sized lump of corroded bronze and rotten wood, broken into pieces. It was easy to ignore, and for a while, it was ignored. Then, in 1902, an archaeologist at the museum named Valerios Stais took a closer look. In the corrosion, he saw something that did not belong on a statue or a coin. A gear wheel. Precise teeth, cut into bronze. And around it, faint Greek inscriptions. A gear is not art. A gear is a machine, and nothing in the ancient world was supposed to contain a machine like this. To understand the shock, you have to understand what the Greeks were not supposed to have. They had astonishing astronomy, geometry, star catalogs, clever instruments for measuring the sky. What they were not believed to have was geared computation. Toothed wheels meshing together, turning one motion into another, doing arithmetic with metal. That kind of technology, as far as the surviving record went, belonged to the Middle Ages and later, not to a workshop from before the time of Julius Caesar. Yet here it was. As the fragments were studied, more wheels appeared today. About 30 corroded gears survive in the pieces we have. The complete machine probably held around 37. And maybe more. They were thin, hand-cut, and astonishingly fine, some with teeth barely a millimeter apart. All of it comes down to us in just 82 corroded fragments, 7 of them carrying almost all of the surviving gears and writing. This was not a charm or a decoration. It was an instrument, and the only way to understand it was to ask what all those gears were built to do. So let us be precise, because this is exactly where the myths start. The Antikythera mechanism is not a magic box, and it is not a modern computer. It is the oldest known analog computer. A clearer everyday word is calculator. You turned a crank on the side, and that single input drove the entire gear train at once. Every pointer moved together, modeling the sky for whatever date you chose. It computes, but you cannot reprogram it. It does one magnificent job. On the front face was a dial marked with the 12 signs of the zodiac, wrapped by a calendar ring of 365 days. Pointers tracked the sun and the moon as they moved against the stars. There was even a little ball, half silver and half black, that turned to show the phase of the moon. With one hand you could wind the heavens forward and read where the sun and moon would be. That alone would be remarkable, and it was the simple part. Turn the device over and it gets stranger. The back carried two large spiral dials, and the lower one is the showpiece. It runs on the Saros cycle, an 18-year rhythm the Babylonians had noticed in eclipses. The spiral is divided into 223 months, and into many of those cells the makers carved small glyphs. Each glyph is a prediction. It tells you which month an eclipse was due, whether of the sun or the moon, and roughly what hour to look. Be careful how you hear that. It does not conjure eclipses out of nothing, and it does not promise that everyone is visible from your own hillside. It reads a repeating pattern off the gears, a forecast of when to watch, not a one-off prophecy. There was even a small correction dial marked in hours to absorb the slippage in the cycle. 2,000 years ago, someone built a bronze object that could tell you by hand when the sky was about to go dark. The upper back dial kept time on a longer scale. It is a 5-turn spiral of 235 months, laid out as the 19-year Metonic cycle, the span that brings the sun and moon back into step. The month names carved into it are not from Athens. They are Corinthian, a clue we will come back to. Beside it sat a smaller dial that has nothing to do with astronomy at all. It tracked a 4-year cycle and named the great Panhellenic games, Olympia, Nemea, Isthmia, Pythia. It is the only pointer on the whole machine that runs backward. Think about what that means. The same instrument that predicted eclipses also told you when the next Olympic Games would fall. The cosmos, the calendar, and civic life, all turning on one crank. This was not just an astronomer's toy. It tied the heavens to the rhythm of Greek society. There is one piece of engineering that still makes specialists go quiet. The moon does not cross our sky at a steady pace. It speeds up and slows down because its orbit is not a perfect circle. The Greek astronomer Hipparchus had worked out that pattern. Somehow, the maker of this device built the pattern into bronze. Hidden in the gears is a pair of wheels mounted slightly off-center. A pin on one of them rides in a cut slot on the other. As they turn, that tiny offset makes the output speed up and slow down, imitating the real motion of the moon across the year. It is the earliest known use of this kind of gearing anywhere in human history. And this part is not a guess, and not a reconstruction. The wheels are physically there, in the corroded metal, still doing exactly that. Whoever designed this was not just a clever mechanic. They had turned a deep idea in astronomy into something you could hold in your hand and turn. Now the honest caveat, because this is where good documentaries go wrong. The back of the machine is rock solid. The eclipse dial, the calendars, the moon's variable speed, the gears and the inscription survive. We can hold the evidence in our hands. The front is a different kind of claim. In 2021, a team published a beautiful reconstruction of the full front display, showing not only the sun and moon, but all 5 planets the Greeks knew. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, riding on nested rings. It is plausible, and it is anchored to numbers carved on the device itself, like a 462-year cycle for Venus. But you should know what kind of claim it is. Almost none of the planetary gearing survived. The 5-planet front is a modern reconstruction, a best guess at how the lost parts must have worked. So when you see those glowing rings, hold them lightly. The eclipse machine is fact. The planets are a brilliant hypothesis. How can anyone own all of this from a corroded lump? The answer is decades of stubborn work. In the 1970s, a historian named Derek de Sola Price had the fragments X-rayed and counted gears that no one could see from the outside. His reconstruction turned out to be partly wrong, but he proved the thing was a calculating machine. Even the wreck itself kept pulling people back. In 1976, the famous diver Jacques Cousteau returned to the site and recovered coins that helped pin the sinking to around 70 to 60 BC. Later, A museum curator named Michael Wright built working models and showed how much gearing the device must once have held. Then, in 2005, a group called the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, led by Tony Freeth and Mike Edmonds, brought in heavy machinery, a multi-ton microfocus X-ray scanner built to see inside solid metal, slice by slice. Suddenly, the hidden teeth were countable, and the faint inscriptions, thousands of tiny Greek letters, came into focus. It turned out the device carried its own instruction text, an ancient manual describing what each dial showed. The machine, in a sense, explained itself. This is the part of the story where the internet reaches for aliens. Resist it. There is nothing alien about the Antikythera mechanism. Its writing is Greek. Its cycles are Greek and Babylonian astronomy. Everything it does fits what we know educated Greeks understood about the sky. It is not an object out of time. It is the high point of a tradition. And we are not guessing about that tradition. The Roman writer Cicero, alive in the same century as the wreck, describes geared bronze models of the heavens. He writes about a sphere built by Archimedes, carried back to Rome as treasure after the fall of Syracuse, that showed the sun, moon, and planets moving together. He describes another one made by his own teacher. So the mechanism is not a miracle from nowhere. It is the single survivor of a craft that real people practiced and wrote about, and then lost. There were others. We simply have not found them. And that is the haunting part. After this, the trail goes quiet. No surviving object of anything close to this complexity appears again for more than 1,000 years. Be careful with that sentence. It does not mean people forgot how to make gears. Simpler geared devices do survive in between, a Byzantine sundial with calendar gears, medieval astrolabes from the Islamic world. The craft did not vanish. But nothing this intricate turns up again until the great astronomical clocks of medieval Europe, built more than 1,000 years later. And we still do not know who made the original. Rhodes is tempting, the home of the astronomer Hipparchus. But remember those Corinthian month names. They point instead toward Corinth, or its famous colony Syracuse, the city of Archimedes. The honest answer is that we do not yet know whose hands built it. One machine from a lost workshop, pulled up by accident by sponge divers 2,000 years later. It would be easy to end this with aliens or with lost super civilizations. The truth is better and stranger. 2,000 years ago in a Greek workshop, someone compressed the motion of the heavens into a box of bronze you could turn with one hand. Eclipses, calendars, the wandering moon, all of it geared. We have exactly one of these, not because it was the only one, but because bronze gets melted down, ships sink, and almost nothing from the ancient world survives. This machine reached us through a shipwreck, a storm, and a diver who thought he had found a field of corpses. So the real mystery is not how the ancients built it, it is how much we have lost without ever knowing. The Antikythera mechanism is not the strangest thing the ancient world made. It is just the one piece that happened to survive.